I'm going to ask you a question. What comes to your mind when one mentions the word death? Quite often, this word invokes feelings of sadness, grief, and misery. I've seen people develop goosebumps. Some would clench their jaws together. Some even get edgy and are traumatized by the death of someone. Take the person sitting next to you, for example. You are friends, or you just met here and started talking to each other. You are laughing together and friendly with one another. What would happen if the same person sitting next to you drops dead? Within seconds, you would move from these feelings of affection to being afraid of this person. You wouldn't even want to look at that person, let alone touch him or her. Why? My hope is that after today, you will not feel the same way. Death should not induce this gut-wrenching fear or bring sadness to anyone. I actually think that death should be embraced and celebrated. Yes, embraced and celebrated. My perception and attitude to death is obviously linked to my personal experiences. So let me share with you my background. I trained as a medical doctor. Basically, like any other doctor, I wanted to take care of patients, treat diseases, as well as to relieve pain and suffering. I then specialized in the area of pathology, that is the study of disease etiologies, what causes these diseases, how they are transmitted, and how they may lead to death. I subspecialized in the area of forensic pathology, that is the application of medicine and pathology for the needs of the criminal justice system. As you know, quite often death is as a result of unnatural causes like physical harm and violence. At the same time, being a doctor, I am an African medical doctor. I work as a death investigator in an African environment. And you know, death investigation from a forensic perspective in an African setting has forced me to reconcile science with my African beliefs. This has been very phenomenal and unique. Like any other community, we Africans view death according to our sociocultural beliefs. One belief system shapes how they view death and can make a person develop either positive or negative attitude to death. And these are not easy to shake off. Here in Botswana, we subscribe to a culture rooted in ancestral belief system and shaped by Judeo-Christian concepts. We typically believe in the afterlife, that our body is only a vessel that remains empty after death. We do, however, attach significance to this vessel because of the soul contained in. It is somehow believed that this soul hovers around the body and continues to live even after death. We therefore view bodies not just as bodies, but perhaps as vessels surrounded by this spiritual aura that we cannot explain. There's therefore that mysticism surrounding death, and unfortunately we happen to focus on those explanations that induces fear and pain. I personally come from Tlokweng, a small village in the outskirts of the capital city, Gaborone, where we bury our deceased persons within our residential yards and children often under the floors of our houses. As Batlokwa tribe, we feel if we use outside cemeteries, we are actually neglecting or throwing away our deceased persons. Like any other tribes in Botswana, we handle the deceased with reverence and care. We spend days mourning the deceased persons, sometimes more than a week. And this is obviously the influence from our ancestral belief system. So you see, our culture and way of thinking encourages us to find elaborate and sinister motives associated with death. Someone cannot just die from a heart attack without finding some peculiar explanations associated with that death. People dying, especially at gatherings, are commonly said to have been poisoned. Unfortunately, this belief system robs us of ability to see death from a positive point of view. From a medical standpoint, a person is an organism that has physiology that manifests as what you call life. Each person is made up of and controlled by systems. For example, we have the cardiovascular system, which is the heart and related structures, the respiratory system, which is the lungs and the entire breathing apparatus, the neurological system, which is the thinking and sensory mechanism made up of the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. Death is what happens when this system shuts down and ceases to function. And after any living thing dies, it goes back to the ground and becomes organic matter. So tell me, if a person is, for example, crashed by a fast-moving car, isn't it like a mosquito being smashed by someone's hand? You must be wondering, how can this guy compare the death of a person to that of a mosquito? My experience has taught me that a dead body is really a carcass that the deceased person has left behind on earth for us to study. The so-and-so we know, it's no more. Of course, you may say gone or going depending on your belief system, but the fact is that they are no more. What we see is just a bag of bones and meat that we can study. You know, I've come to view the deceased body as their gift to humanity. It affords us opportunity to study their causes of death, thereby delaying or preventing the death of those who are still alive. A dead body is a sacrifice to humanity. And you know, this altruistic behavior is also seen in other animals. For example, a bee will attack and sting if it senses intrusion to its nest, even though it knows that its stingers will be detached from the abdomen, therefore dying in the process. But it also knows that the enemy will run away and leave the rest of the colony to propagate its progeny. Let me share with you some of the cases I've come across in order to prove my assertion that death can be a gift to humanity. A family was experiencing the death of their children before they reached 11 years of age. In fact, 3 children died. The third child died at the age of 6 years. An autopsy and genetic tests revealed that this child died from an inherited electrical disorder of the heart. This information ensured that 2 other children who were still alive were referred to a cardiologist or heart specialist and were ultimately put on medication to prevent death from this inherited heart condition. So you see, the death of this particular 6-year-old child was a blessing to 2 others who continue to live even up to today. Their parents were also relieved that the other children did not die from some sort of witchcraft or Tswana magic or voodoo. So this is how this death was a gift to everyone else. Second case. 3 people, including a pastor, died while conducting a baptismal service in Koloben River, 40 kilometers southwest of Gaborone. The popular belief among the community was that there was a big snake or anaconda-like creature, commonly referred to as kwanyape, that lives in the river. Apparently, the snake would occasionally take people who swim in that part of the river. After an intensive investigation, it was apparent that the cause of death was just drowning, that they died, they drowned in deeper, muddier waters. And imagine, none of the people who are present there could rescue them because they couldn't swim as well. So this invaluable information would in future be used by the authorities to ensure that anybody conducting a religious ceremony in this river will be accompanied by trained swimmers. So the death of these three was a blessing to the entire community. My third case. While excavating a caved water point or borehole, a person disappeared. The second person who followed to check on the first also did not resurface. Everybody abandoned the borehole, and nobody wanted to go near it because surely there must have been something taking these people. Guess that what is? The infamous anaconda. After rescuers ultimately retrieved the bodies, post-mortem examination showed that they died from carbon monoxide poisoning that was from a fuel generator they were using to light up inside the cave. There was a relief to the community. A borehole that would have been abandoned for generations to come and probably also associated with this myth was ultimately used for the betterment of the community. A detainee who commits suicide in custody ensured that holding cells are constructed such that they do not have points where others can hang themselves. Or that idea to buy blankets without seams were put forward. You can imagine somebody committing suicide may be just sending a message that my workplace is horrible, so please do something about it. Or perhaps my partner is abusive. So ladies, stay away from this man. Criminals who could have perpetuated more violence and deaths are put behind bars because of the death of one particular person. You may be aware that the life expectancy of the world today is above 70 years, compared to 1960 when it was hovering around 57 years. Whether this is due to advanced medical technology, better disease management, or new techniques like stem cell theory, what we know is that it is because of the death of other fellow human beings that we are able to learn from their bodies, thereby preventing the death of those who are alive. So my friends, my role as a forensic pathologist is to use evidence left by death to bring peace to those who survive. For example, we are able to reassure people that they are not being bewitched. We do, however, push science and facts above all else in order to combat the hysteria and paranoia commonly associated with deaths. We also try to understand people's background and to see why they may view death in a certain manner. Death is painful. Nobody can deny that. Losing someone close to you, it's saddening. The hole that the dead person leaves, it's very difficult to feel. So while shedding tears when a loved one dies, and it is okay to do that, pause for a moment and try to understand what you can learn from their death. People teach us so many things when they're alive, but also when they die, they give us their dead body to learn from. So my friends, let us try to embrace death, because a dead body is the deceased gift to the living. Thank you.